Welcome to the Wolf Power Club, the weekly podcast where we discuss energy, industry and politics. I'm your host Alex. I've sold and bought a few companies and also I've sold billions of litres. Join me on this journey to net zero. Download on Apple Podcasts. Season 1 brought to you by AIM Recruit, the leading recruiters in logistics, transport and energy at www.aimrecruit.com. Welcome to the Wolf Power Club podcast, and today is a very exciting episode. We have Martin Lee from Birch Performance, and we're going to be talking about maybe one of the purest subjects we'll ever talk about in the energy sector, and that is how you go about breaking 200 miles per hour. I was very fortunate to meet Martin on a Cold War airfield in the Midlands of the UK this early part of the summer. And today we're going to share about how his company is helping people fulfill their dreams in breaking 200 miles per hour. But also, Martin's also a consultant in the nuclear industry. So without any further ado, Martin, can I please welcome you to the podcast?
Thank you very much, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot for the invite.
So, Martin, we'll kick off what we do with a lot of our guests. How on earth did you get into the energy sector in the first place?
Well, as per your intro, I've kind of got two hats in this area. In the early 2000s, I joined British Energy, which is a nuclear power generating company, and spent many years with them. They became EDF, so I started off on a corporate point of view, working there in supply chain, lots of exciting projects in that. And then how I met you was around about 2018. I started my own business, kind of combining my experience of technical buying and sort of nuclear fuels with race fuels and performance fuels. So yeah, we own a company called Birch Performance, which is an online seller of race fuels, and as you say, we get to meet up with people trying to do really exciting things.
And it's great to hear because it's kind of a vaguely similar path to my own. My father was actually a nuclear engineer at what was British Energy, so
Brilliant.
I even remember back in the day they're called something else like National Nuclear Power or something. They had this big launch party at the Science Museum, and then they came British Energy about a year later with different branding. But we had the great fun of going to the dinosaurs at the Natural History Museum and a day at the Science Museum, so we enjoyed it. And always been passionate about motorsport, and I think I was passionate about motorsport, and that's what led to me being in the energy industry, like yourself. So to spend the last quarter of a century in the energy industry, you must have a passion for it. Where does that sort of professional buzz for looking for solutions in nuclear or looking for solutions in performance come from?
There's a definite link between them, isn't there? I really enjoyed my time in the nuclear industry. You know, I got involved in many projects, you know, a lot of technical challenges there, and you're always kind of bouncing around just trying to understand, you know, where are we now, where do we need to be, what do we need to do, and I think it's a great team to work with, and it's flowed through to Birch Performance as well. I think my biggest passion nowadays with the motorsport and the fuel side is working with customers, and how, you know, you pick up a new customer and you spend time understanding what their requirements are, help them make a few advised changes, and then you see them exceeding their expectations, you know, setting personal bests, and in some cases sort of European and world records, and that for us that's success. That's great.
And sort of touching a bit on the nuclear side, do you feel in Britain that it's always kind of been fighting for its space within the energy sector? Because I always saw from my father the frustration that energy has huge demands that nuclear can fill, but constantly with nuclear you've got significant timelines, and you've also got significant work to do with government relationship and policymakers, and quite often the policymakers are there a short time and the projects are there a long time. Have you ever found that in your career with nuclear?
I certainly think in the recent past, over the last 20 years, I think there's a lack of understanding and knowledge of it, and there's sort of things that have happened where there's perhaps an association where you think, okay, is this okay? I joined that industry. I did my due diligence beforehand, and I was very satisfied at the time that it was an industry I was happy to work in, and have gone on to absolutely love it. I really believe in it. I think it's a key element of clean energy generation going forward, and the way that it's handled is very conservatively and very considered, with sort of nuclear safety always being the overriding priority. So, yeah, I believe that the industry is a very good industry, and its product is one that is definitely worthwhile supporting.
Yeah, I think if anyone's never met a nuclear engineer, one thing I'd say is safety is always key. I never forget when I went to my first football match, my dad wasn't telling me which team to support. His background being nuclear was like, well, look at where the safety exits are, Alex, and if there's trouble, where are you going to leave the stadium?
Yeah,
And I'd call that as the
I
nuclear
go.
engineer's approach to a football match.
Do you know what? I go to a hotel, and the first thing to do is check where the fire exits are. Um, they're really good lessons I've learnt there around human performance as part of safety, and I've carried them through. Accountability is a huge thing in the nuclear industry, being accountable for decisions and being in a safe environment where you can discuss any issues. And I absolutely brought that ethos through into Birch Performance. And I think one of the driving factors for us is, as well as sort of having very high quality products that deliver high levels of value, we're backing it up with really slick operations. I'd argue second to none. So our customers get excellent service, and that in part is thanks to experiences learned in the nuclear industry, where things are sort of very well organized, very well understood, and we understand what we're doing before we do it.
And just looking at the nuclear days, and we'll touch a bit more onto Birch in a second, but looking at nuclear days, what were some of the best energy deals you involved in, or some of the energy deals that didn't go so well?
Well, lots of very interesting deals there. I'm probably limited a bit on some of what
Yes,
I can go
confidential.
into, but I had quite a wide ranging experience there. At the end, I was looking after the nuclear fuel on the supply chain side, which I absolutely loved. It was a really good challenge, and it was a little different to traditional supply chain, as you can imagine. But I found that a really good experience. I won't go into major details, but naturally, with Brexit coming in, there were challenges there, and that was navigated really well. I mean, your light stayed on, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then there are other things I've got involved in before where they've been sort of real technical challenges. I spent some time in a function that was looking at how you keep power stations tip top. Okay, so if there was a particular technical problem, then a team would form and look at it, and that was wonderful working with people. But when the answer isn't obvious, that's probably when I thrive, to be honest.
So now we go to really focus on Birch Performance and breaking 200 miles per hour. Um, I think for our listeners, some of you, this might be a dream, because I know for me, it was always on my bucket list to break 200 miles per hour. And just to take our listeners back a bit, a mutual friend we've got in common, a guy which is called Steve C, because he's quite a pirate guy. But Steve basically and I were in a restaurant doing a charity car run. And Steve basically told me that his dream was to break 200 miles per hour. And as we sat there, I was like, "That's my dream as well." And we had a long discussion, and he talked about how how basically been looking into what vehicle could do it, how you could break it, how you could do it legally. Just be clear for everyone on the podcast, we are talking about runways here, and not on anywhere else other than a designated safe area to do it. And I think what a lot of people don't realise is that almost getting a modern motor vehicle to sort of 140, 150 is quite doable. But then every bit of speed, once you start nudging past that for lots of different reasons, is difficult. And actually going past the 200 miles an hour is really difficult. And what a lot of people might not realize, because they'll see their Auto Trader app and it'll say on paper what a car can do. But how did you get involved in racing fuels? And we're going to spend a bit of time on this because a lot of people won't realize to get the very best performance out of a car, you can't use a standard fuel. So how did you get involved in racing fuels and Birch Performance back in 2018 in the first place?
Well, it's funny you talk about that dream of 200 miles per hour, because for me, where it began, I have a Nissan GTR, which is the car that you managed to do 200 in. Mine was lower power at the time, and I'd gone to an event at Bruntingthorpe Runway, that's a very long runway, where you can go as fast as you possibly can. And I was gunning for 200 miles per hour. I don't know what it is about the number, it's just a number, but there's definitely something there. Back in the old days, in the 90s, the dream was to have a car with 200 horsepower, and now it's a car that does 200 miles per hour, which of course is wild. And I went there and I was recording the session, and I didn't get to it. I only got to 197, which one might think is very fast, but it's I can walk faster than 3 miles per hour. So it was a bit disappointing. Um, and when I was looking at the recording, I could see in the car, which at that time was fairly new to me, there was a dial flashing that shows how much boost pressure the
Yeah,
turbos are making. And I didn't know quite what that meant. I thought it was just flicking round to the next bit. But what it actually means was it was detecting a potential pre-ignition or knock event, which is where fuel ignites before you want it to. So as the piston's coming up, it ignites. You don't want that. That's what will destroy your engine. And I started looking into that, thinking, well, why is it done that? And part of it's tuning, but I think it was the car was very hot. We'd done quite a lot of runs, and where I landed was I thought perhaps I need to think about the fueling of the car. And then I started with my kind of technical bio brain looking into race fuels, and I chose a race fuel to try in the car, and that it wasn't fully on race fuel. I just
yeah.
added some to the tank at a later event. And I didn't have a knock event at all, and the car felt great, and it felt crisp, and it performed really well. So um, I got into race fuels by not understanding initially that I needed race fuels, and then finding one. And amusingly, the fuel I landed on, which was a fairly light fuel, it actually had lower octane, had a lower RON number
Oh
than the
wow.
stuff I'd been buying at the forecourt, but it had a higher no MON number. So actually, the fuel itself was far more robust. So that's how I got into it, and then I used them for quite a while. And then through relationships and hobby and interest and wanting more and more power, I actually started the business as I guess a side business really, just some fun, a hobby business, because I kind of wanted the real life MBA
Yeah.
of running your own business. I'd always wanted to. I never had, because I'd sort of had success in the corporate world, and it became too difficult. So I thought, well, this is fairly light-hearted. I'll do that, and then it kind of just grew from there, really.
And I think it's great what you explained there is that I think what a lot of people don't realise is even on these dedicated runway days, because obviously part of it is where you have to brake to get to the end of the runway and there's very strict rules. There's and certain event I was at where you're standing still and going to a mile. There's a whole group of cars that sort of get up to, as you say, around that 190 mark. But there's very few actually that go over the 200 mark in the length of a runway. And there's probably lots of people on this podcast saying, yeah, but on my Auto Trader app, I've got a supercar and it tells me I can go over 200. I can tell everyone now that I also have one of those cars that on an Auto Trader app says it can do it, but with no race fuel, no extra horsepower, no modifications, from start to the mile. It actually hit 167. So I think for all of you that are listening that haven't been there, it's amazing the kind of mountain from the foothalls to go from there to actually pass it. So going then on to the long term ambitions of Birch Performance, as you sort of just told the listeners, you've been bringing in these racing fuels to events like this. Yeah, what are the sort of long term plans for Birch Performance? I also do appreciate you're very much still a nuclear consultant. So I guess with both hats on, the sort of future ambitions and plans for both Birch Performance and the nuclear consultancy.
Mm. I've long experience in the nuclear world and the corporate world, and I saw success with that, which is why I've continued doing it for a long, 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 long time. So, there are bits of work that we do. Birch is a seasonal business, as you can imagine. So, I quite like to get into it because it's interesting. So we do that, and I'll continue to do that. Um, for Birch Performance, we have, as I said before, really slick operations, and we're always interested in that customer experience. So a driver for us is to be able to deliver very high quality fuels and products that deliver high value, and to back it up with excellent service for people. And part of that customer experience is trying to break down the cost
Yeah.
of the hobby. Everything nowadays, and it's probably always been the way, it's just very expensive. So the majority of fuel cells that we do are e-commerce sales. So we're mostly an online business, and the cost of safely shipping fuel around the country through the Hascam network is quite pricey. So we're always using our skills and experience to look at making sure we've got the best contracts in place for shipping, but to help the overall experience become more efficient, deliver even more value for our customers, actually a big driver for us is developing a trade network across the country where we can move fuel in bulks out to different trade partners, which means when you ring up Alex thinking we're going over 200, I want some race fuel, actually rather than having to pay 50 or £100 delivery for a couple of barrels, I can actually just point you in the direction of your local person and go and pick it up, and it makes it easy.
Beautiful. We will leave a link in the show notes to Birch Performance website. But I think, yeah, if you have got a distribution network or site of resellers that want to get in touch with Martin, that'd be fantastic. I think the other thing that I realised wasn't just the value of the pricing, but people spend so many hours perfecting their machinery. As you said, the type of performance they're doing, the fuel actually protects the engine, and you're obviously going to the very extreme of that engine's performance. Even if they've have had one of the excellent tuning houses in Britain sort of involved, it's still the more protection you can have from a good fuel is just so important. So it's almost protecting someone's great love of time and commitment and keeping it on the road. I just also it's a little bit sort of off topic, but I was just wondering whether it's on the nuclear side or on performance fuel side. We've obviously got a brand new government in the UK. I was just wondering, without getting too political about stuff from the past, whether there's anything in the future you would like to see from a government side in terms of supporting the energy industry.
Well, part of the Labour manifesto was around the formation of Great British Energy,
Yeah,
and I thought that name, that's familiar. Um, so they're on it, and they're continuing to support new build. So I think I was very happy with that. As I say before, passionate about that industry, so I want to see that continue to prosper. I think it's important on the energy mix. From us on a racial point of view, things that are important to us is probably import tax, VAT, fuel duty. At the moment, the fuels, they're duty paid when they're imported, and the way it all stacks up is if we sell a barrel of fuel for £100, £30 of that is tax. So it's a big portion of it, and to try and keep it affordable for customers, actually, I'm wary of those, and we follow that online to see what's coming up. And then we're also interested in continued support on renewable fuels that we're starting to see pop up in motorsport, synthetic fuels. I think Porsche are doing quite a lot of work on that.
yeah,
So we're definitely for environmental improvement, and I think there's a place for the internal combustion engine and these sorts of fuels in it.
And I was just then also, you know, it's great to see that you've used your passion for nuclear and your passion for motorsport to creation of Birch Performance. Um, if you'd say go back to sort of 1999, 2000, but for say someone about to either leave school, you leave university in 2024, 2025, what would your advice be about having a sort of really good career in the energy industry? And what I've liked about today's chat is I can see you've had lots of fun along the way. Like I can see like the eyes lighting up at some of the past memories. And I was just wondering, yeah, what sort of advice would you give them? Not sort of just to get into the industry, but really how to enjoy the energy sector.
Actually, I didn't follow the traditional academic route. I left after GCSEs actually, and I went into an apprenticeship with a really nice high-end company called Renishaw, who makes sort of very high precision measuring equipment, and continued to develop myself that way through an apprenticeship. So I'm a big believer in apprenticeships, and I think the energy industry has a lot of opportunities for graduates, for apprenticeships, and whatever level you're going in, the advice is always continue to develop yourself. I've continued to do that. I think probably one of the reasons, as well as liking the nuclear industry, that I stayed there was it helped me continue to professionally develop, like continuously really, both through the experiences of what I was doing, but through professional qualifications. So I did become degree qualified. So yeah, I think the advice is it's a great place to be. I think there's a lot happening at the moment, and if you can go in and do it in a way where you get to continue to develop, that's the way to go.
So just, I guess the final question, and really thanks for your time today, Martin. I really hope next time we're together, we're on a runway, and I've invested my hard-earned work into something that can also break 200 miles an hour. But how can people do business with Birch Performance, or if a nuclear board is listening and they want your consultancy services, what's the best way to do business with Birch Performance if they've heard today and we're like, actually that Martin guy knows a lot about fuel, I want to do business with him? What's the best way to do that?
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, people can go onto our website, Birch Performance, and message through there, or find us on Instagram or Facebook. That seems to be the way. And then I've also got a LinkedIn profile too, if people wanted to approach that way.
Excellent. Well, guys, I think this has been one of the best ever Wolf Power Clubs. Probably helps that I'm absolutely obsessed with that 200 number. As I say, I've done it as a passenger, haven't done it as a driver yet. I'm certainly never going to do it on a motorbike, but I'm delighted that someone like Martin has used his expertise from the nuclear world to bring it to safe fuels and high performance fuels. I'd really like to thank you for your time, Martin. It's been brilliant this afternoon.
Thank you, Alex. And I'll tell you, come and drive my car, and you do it yourself. It's because it is good. It's good.
I'll definitely take that up. Definitely take that up.